Hello and welcome to the JackCast, your Swansea City podcast. I think we'll all be chipper tonight as we record this and analyse two wins of 2-0 each. And joining me to do just that is Steve Carroll and Gito Llewellyn. Evening both.
Evening.
Evening.
So we'll do what we did last week and go to the most recent game first and analyse that because that's freshest in our memories. And that was Saturday's game at home to Blackburn. Before this pair of games, Steve, you said minimum of 3 points. 6 was the return. And Blackburn, perhaps one of the most complete performances, maybe, under Cooper's tenure here.
Yeah, it's been a very good week, really, hasn't it? As I said, I think when you have two home games, back to back, if you don't win at least one of them, you're always going to be frustrated unless, if you're in the Prem and you've got the top two, maybe it's a little bit different. But in general, you've got to be targeting to win at least one of them. So, no, it's been a very good week. And as you say, the Blackburn game yesterday, we did play very well, didn't we? It was very encouraging. A lot of good passages of play, a couple of good goals as well. So, yeah, it's very encouraging. As you say, probably one of the best performances since Steve Cooper took the job. So it does, feel very optimistic about things at the moment, doesn't it?
Interesting sort of game as well, Gito, wasn't it? I mean, Blackburn always looked a threat, and it always felt like maybe one goal wouldn't do it for us in this game. And they did create a fair few chances, but never at any point did I feel that the chances were created because of our mistakes or anything like that. I always felt like Blackburn were just dangerous going forward, and we didn't play particularly badly in order for them to create those chances. And it played its well into quite an entertaining game, particularly the first 45. I thought, well, this could swing either way here.
Yeah, it was a really good game. I mean, it's the kind of game that we actually haven't seen a lot of across the Championship this season. Just two teams who we're going for it. What you'd actually expect a Championship game to be. It's just been so much tighter across the league than usual. But yeah, the only time that we've, kind of made any kind of slip up and gave them a big chance as a result of that was Norton's header back to Woodman, which Armstrong probably should have done better with, but Woodman did very well to come up quickly and block it. But Blackburn did create chances, but that's not a surprise. They're the league's top scorers. They've got a lot of good attacking players. But the fact that we kept a clean sheet against them is pretty damn good. They've regularly scored 4 or 5 goals this season already. They are a very dangerous team going forward. At the back, they've got their issues. They're not the bigger side. They're quite open. They'll give you chances. But going forward, they are always dangerous, as they showed on Saturday. But we did deal with them very well. And their chances, for the most part, were, they weren't from close range. They were from kind of the edge of the area. We, on the whole, I thought, dealt very well with what was a very dangerous attacking side.
Yeah, we did. And we dealt with them quite well at the back, Steve, but also provided that attacking intent going forward as well. I'm pretty sure I remember our national public broadcaster sending out a tweet saying that Cardiff were the first team to keep a clean sheet against her, which we all laughed at the time because, of course, celebrating a point is a bit of a stretch, isn't it? And Swansea managed to keep the clean sheet, but also grab 2 goals in the process. And I suppose the manner in which the goals came add to what Gito's just said there in the weakness potentially at the back for Blackburn, because both were headers. The first one from a corner, and it's a great corner from Connor Roberts, and a fantastic header by Ben Cabango.
But yeah, I know quite a few people have been critical sometimes of Matt Grimes's set pieces, and obviously he didn't play yesterday, so we had to change that around a bit. But as you say, it was a really encouraging cross from Connor Roberts, who had a very good game, I thought. And, I think I famously said a few weeks back, didn't I, that if you took out Gibbs, White, AU and Lowe, you just barely saw anyone else other than maybe Fulton ever chipping in with any goals. So Cabango has silenced me a bit now because he scored 2 already this season, hasn't he? So I think it's good to have that centre half as a threat, really, as well, isn't it? From set pieces, it can be worth, quite a few points over the course of the season. I always remember John Terry in particular at Chelsea just being this, player who would regularly chip in with 5 or 6 goals a season. And it just makes such a difference, doesn't it? So I think that's what we need, because if you think of it, Joe Rodon never scored for us. Van der Hoorn maybe chipped in occasionally. where he hasn't scored as of yet. But it can make a big difference. Alfie Mawson, I know, was one who would he scored a few for us, didn't he? So hopefully it can become a key threat for us, really. And with the second goal, it was a lovely move, really, wasn't it? And Danda, who I thought had a decent game again. I mean, that ball in the first half that he played with the outside of the boot was amazing, really, wasn't it? It was a shame
it deserved
that
the finish, really, didn't it?
Yeah, it was Lowe wasted that, didn't he? That was a big shame, wasn't it? But Danda had a good game again, I thought, and he's popped a great ball in there. And to be fair to you, he's not the biggest, but we all know he's got a bit of a leap in him, and he is very good in the air. He did it in his first spell with us, and he's made the game safe. So it's encouraging. We're scoring maybe different types of goals, and if you can offer a lot of different threats, then it's going to be difficult for the opposition to find answers.
In between the two goals, and in particular the moment you talked about last time, Gito, which was the Armstrong opportunity where Woodman came out and clawed it away. That was about a minute or so after Swansea had a penalty appeal turned down, which looked to me, and I think there'll probably be a bit of debate on this, looked to me like it should have been given. I mean, defenders jumped in on it and he hasn't got the ball, and Roberts has fallen under his challenge. So, I mean, he's ticking a few boxes to me in terms of penalty award.
Yeah, I think it should have been a penalty, but it is remarkable how often they aren't given. I thought Roberts had got himself in front of the defender. The defender's just pushed into him, basically. He's not going for the ball. He's just going for the man, and he's pushed him over. Really, and prevented Roberts from getting on the end of the ball. I thought there should have been a penalty. I mean, I can see the argument to say that Roberts has kind of put his leg in front of the defender to try and kind of, I don't know, force the foul. But I think Roberts has done the hard work of getting in front of the defender. The defender has taken him out. That's the way I see it. And I thought we were unlucky not to get the spot kick.
You think on the other side, Steve, I believe.
Yeah, I didn't think it was a pen. He's gone down too easily for me. Someone did point out to me it's more of a pen than the one that we gave away last week, and yeah. I think that's a fair point. But I didn't think it was a pen. I think if we'd been on the wrong end of that, we'd have been pretty pissed off. So, no real complaints from me, really. I think it wasn't enough of a foul to warrant us being given the pen.
Yeah, and I find that into the second half, Gito, I think we were all thinking based on the first 45, we're going to need a second goal to get a bit of traction, a bit of control of the fixture. I just felt it was a thoroughly professional way of approaching the game from start to finish. I didn't feel at any point that we necessarily panicked, and there was a moment I tweeted about yesterday afternoon. I think it was 83 minutes on the clock after we'd gone 2-0 up, and we were just trying to see the game out. And Corey Smith received the ball under a bit of pressure, and Blackburn obviously at this point with a very high press, even higher than the rest of the game. And he took a touch. He was clearly under pressure, and he thumped it high into the West Stand. And I just thought, good, because we've lost possession now on the halfway line, rather than Blackburn having three strikers running at our defence, possibly getting themselves back into the game. It's that sort of professionalism and knowing when to play and when to just get rid, which I thought we dealt with particularly well yesterday.
Yeah, that's maturity as well, isn't it? That's just that understanding of how to see a game out and how to deal with a game, how to control a game as well, if we're being honest. And I thought one of the really striking things over the last two games from Swansea is the confidence that the players seem to be showing, and also the enjoyment. They seem to be expressing themselves a lot more on the pitch. They are playing with a smile, but they're also playing with this real belief. And I was crunching the numbers before, and one of the things that's remarkable, Swansea have only been behind for 55 minutes so far this season. Which is the lowest that's by far the best in the championship. Not by far, sorry, I shouldn't have said that, but it is the best record in the championship. And I think you're seeing this is something that a lot of teams are trying to achieve now, but the Swans are doing it better than anybody else. If as long as you are not behind, you're giving yourself so much less to do. I mean that sounds very simplistic. But if you fall behind in a game, oh my God, suddenly it's an uphill task to get anything out of it. Whereas as long as it's 0-0, you've got a point, and it only takes one goal to get that 3 points, and you'd always back yourself to keep the opposition out. So 55 minutes the Swans have been behind this season. To put that in perspective, Cardiff, who've really struggled in this department, have been behind for 313 minutes. That's an hour longer than Wickham have been behind this season, which
that devastates me.
But it shows how they are struggling to control matches. They're giving themselves such an uphill task every game, because every single game they're falling behind, and they have to go behind before they in any way kick into action. We saw it against QPR this weekend. They were 2-0 down, and suddenly they've got to work their socks off just to get a point out the game, which obviously they didn't get in the end. I think it's one of the defining traits of this season with the Swans. I mean, we always say that the first goal is crucial, but we always think of it as the team that scores the first goal. That's what's crucial. But actually, conceding the first goal is what's crucial in a lot of games. And Blackburn have shown that if you give Blackburn the lead, if they take the lead, they'll run with it and they'll score 3 or 4 goals. Whereas, they couldn't do it yesterday. We took the lead and we were able to control the game. And it was a real task then for Blackburn to get anything out of us because we had that advantage. And it just shows really how we've been able to control games this season. And that's a real change from last season, I think.
We were talking a couple of weeks ago, Steve, about the midfield, the loss of Morgan Gibbs-White, which obviously is a big blow. And the way the team would set up. And obviously we saw a couple of weeks ago the midfield of Fulton, Smith and Grimes, which I think we all agree that we wish we never ever saw and will never see again. The most negative midfield in the history of football. But what we see now is, as a result of that, I feel, Danda being given an opportunity, and Danda's taking that opportunity crucially. And we saw yesterday, or rather against Stoke, we saw Palmer take an opportunity when he was on the pitch, and Danda taking an opportunity, and also Palmer coming on, and we're seeing that number 10, which is looking, weren't sure about how Casey Palmer would turn out, but early indications suggest, and the recent form of Danda, that maybe it's not going to be as terrible as we feared with Gibbs-White out, because they're both stepping up, particularly the last couple of games.
Yeah, I think you could be right. I mean, I don't think either player is as good as Gibbs-White. I will stress that, because I think Gibbs-White is going to probably end up as a regular player for Wolves in the Premier League at some point, whereas Palmer and Danda, maybe not so much. But I do think we are quite well stocked, really, in that position now, because you think Danda now has come back on the scene. It's always been a funny one with Danda, where he's got in the team and then he'll find himself bombed from the squad. And then a few months later, you'll find himself back in there, and then the same thing happens again. It's a little bit baffling, really. But obviously, he's played the last 2 games, and to be fair to him, he's done really well. I mean, he was very lively in the first half, wasn't he, against Stoke, for example? And then, if you look in that game, Palmer came on for him, put a bit of a challenge on James McLean, which went down well. And then, to be fair, he popped up with a goal as well. One of those where he knew he was going to get clattered, but still stuck his head in there, which is the type of character that you want to see, really, isn't it? And it does look as if we are covered in that position, certainly at the moment. I think, obviously, when Gibbs-White comes back in, then you'd expect him to play once he's up and running and he's fit, because I think he's a class act. But it maybe doesn't look as bad as we feared, because I think when we did hear the news that he was going to be out, then there was a certain amount of fear from us, wasn't there? And it's certainly a good thing now that we've abandoned, as you put it, the most negative formation in the world, the type that Paul Clement would probably have a wet dream over. But yeah, it's certainly, I don't want to see a return to that. I definitely think that maybe Danda should probably have a run of games, or if we're going to, obviously it's such a hectic period, it does make sense to rotate a little bit as well. But we have to say that Palmer probably is edging towards a start as well. So it's certainly encouraging in that sense, and a lot more encouraging than it was a few weeks back, because there was a genuine fear that without Gibbs-White, that we were missing probably our main creative player. And you're going to struggle to see where the goals are going to come from. But we've scored 4 in the last 2, so that's that's made us a little bit more relaxed.
It has, yeah. And as soon as you've brought it in, now we'll take it on to the Stoke game now, and another 2-0 win, Gitto, and some of the same names we're going to talk about here. We're going to talk about the Danders, the Palmers, the J Fultons, who've come into the team, and all of them have shown that they're worthy of game time. I found an odd quote from Cooper after the game yesterday, in that one of his regrets was that he didn't give Dander the chances he deserved last season, which I thought was odd if he's acknowledging that he knew he deserved the chances. But make of that what you will. I'm not sure. I tweeted before the Stoke game that it would be interesting, because being Jan Dander, knowing that he could score a perfect hat-trick against Stoke and not be seen for 6 weeks, which I think, tongue-in-cheek as it was, is something we've got used to with him, as Steve said, isn't it? He can come in, he can look dangerous, and then you won't see him for the rest of the month. And with that, you can't really build up any sort of run of form and consistency and really establish yourself in the team. So I'm glad he's put in 2 performances back-to-back and justified his inclusion on both games. In the first 45 minutes against Stoke, everything went through the man, and he looked a real threat and probably should have had a couple of goals of his own.
Yeah, I mean, he started as he meant to go along, didn't he? That move right in the first 2 minutes, where he really kick-started it with a lovely turn to get away from 2 Stoke players. Played it wide. I think Connor Roberts got the ball back and was really unlucky, smashing it against the post. But that set the tone for his first half, really, and everything just went through him, and he dictated it. And that's, I think the thing with Dander has always been, I think everybody's always looked at him and thought, there is a really good player there. There is clearly a cultured player there who knows how to use the ball, who's got a bit of creativity about him, who's got that capacity to score a goal in him. It's just always, I think, been the physicality that's held him back at championship level. I think he's just always struggled to impose himself in really physical games. So I think the Stoke match, before the match, you probably would have said, a game against Stoke, probably not ideal for Jan Dander, but they'd made changes. They were way off their game. It's worth saying on Tuesday night, they were desperately poor. But they were, because they were a little bit more flat-footed than usual, because they weren't really up to speed. He had a bit more space, and he really exploited it and showed what he can do when he does get a bit of space, bit of time on the ball. And he ran the show, really. And like you said, he should have scored at least 1 goal on Tuesday evening. But, I mean, his contribution just to a general play, you can get that sometimes. Just one player can suddenly get everybody else in the team playing much better, and I think Dander deserves a lot of the credit for the improved general team performance against Stoke, and the more kind of progressive style of play that we were playing, because we had that number 10 there. There was making things happen. There was trying something different. There was pushing his luck on a couple of occasions, and like you said, it was really, really encouraging then that against Blackburn he was given a second consecutive start, because I'm not sure if that's ever happened to him with the Swans before, but it definitely hasn't happened a lot. And it has been something really frustrating, the way he can have a good game and then be out of the squad the following week. That's not really great for his development. So hopefully this will be the period where we really see Dander show that he can do something at this level and can really make a continuous impact throughout the season.
Yeah, I can't argue with any of that. And I suppose we're all watching it thinking, well, there's only one man that this goal is going to come from. So naturally it comes from a wonder goal from J Fulton, Steve. He won't score many like that, but he does pop up with the odd goal, doesn't he, Fulton? I don't think he gets the credit he deserves for, getting you, he will if he plays regularly. I think he'll get you, 6-7 goals a season. And he's not afraid of a shot, and this one particularly outside of the right boot, I don't think anyone knew where that ball was going to end up, but nestling in the top corner, it looked beautiful.
It was just a very clever finish, really, wasn't it? That's probably the best way of describing it. You're not the type of thing you really expect him to do. But as you say, he does have a habit, really, doesn't he, of popping up with goals, probably a little bit under the radar in some ways, because he's his record, if you look at it, is quite reasonable. He's probably into double figures for goals for us now, and it's it sort of shows up probably some of the other midfield players. I mean, I do like Matt Grimes in general, but I mean, he never chips in with any sort of goals, really, does he? I mean, I'm struggling to think of any apart from the penalty he scored against Manchester City. So, I know primarily midfielders, they're not necessarily expected to chip in with loads of goals, but at the same time, you'd like to think they'd get, a few between them in a season. But to be fair to Fulton, even though he's quite a, more of a defensive type midfielder, he does chip in with a few goals, doesn't he? So that's something that we need. Is quite important. And as you say, that finish was a lovely finish, really, an unexpected one, but an unexpected one in a very positive way.
And I think
is Fulton actually still a more defensive midfielder? Is the question I'd ask, because over the last 2 seasons, since we were relegated anyway, we've seen him be a lot more adventurous and getting forward a lot more. And there are some games where you don't see him doing any defending at all, and he spends most of the game trying to spark attacks. And he's talking about his goal scoring there. He scored more goals in the last 2 years than Byers, Grimes, Smith, and Gibbs White all put together. So I think one of the things with Fulton is that perhaps we've pigeonholed him as a defensive midfielder because that is what he was in the early years of his career. But over the last 2 years, actually, we've seen him just add extra strings to his bow, I'd say.
I think that could be a fair point.
I do think when you look at him, obviously originally he was coming on replacing Leon and stuff when he was first bringing into the field of play, and he's known as a bit of a hard tackler as well. So those traits do lend themselves to the defensive midfielder mould, don't they? But I do agree with you, actually, Gitto, that since relegation, I think he's been playing a lot more further forward. It has to have really to have chipped in with the goals he has, and he, like Danda, I don't think is as afraid to try something, and not necessarily take the safest option, which I like. And I think particularly, Gitto, going back to Jan Danda there, that's something I like about him. And that's what you need, I think, sometimes with a number 10. You need someone who's going to take a chance. 6 times out of 10, it won't come off, but it's worth taking the chance, because if it does come off, it could end with a goal. And where you are on the pitch won't necessarily end up with conceding if you lose the ball, but it's the risk taking. It's the calculated risk taking I like, and I think it's something you can't really necessarily teach someone. It's got to be an instinctive thing, and I see that in Danda. I see him with an eye for a pass, a risky pass, but one that can come off and sometimes does.
And I think as well, if the rest of the team is playing a bit more positively and trying to attack a bit more, as we have over the last few games, we're going to get more of a benefit from that attribute of Danda's, because if he's making runs and trying, audacious passes, but none of the other players are really on the same wavelength as him, then it's just going to look silly, and it's going to look like he's, out of his depth and trying stuff that he can't do. Whereas, like we see in the last 2 games, if players are on the same wavelength, making runs for him, creating chances for him as well, then we're going to see a lot more of those come off, like the pass into Lowe, which was absolutely stunning in the first half yesterday. Deserved a much better reaction from Lowe than it got. Like his run against Stoke, in fact, when he was put through. I mean, he was in a very advanced position there, just thinking something may come off here, and we got a bit of luck. Stoke gave the ball away, and we were able to shift it quickly, and he was ready then to run onto it, and only a disappointing final touch let him down and prevented him from getting on the score sheet. So when he's kind of looking to make things happen, and the rest of the team is in that same mindset, then I think a player like Danda is just going to benefit so much more.
Definitely, and looking at, I watched the shortened highlights of yesterday's game, and the second goal that Ayew scored, we've talked about already, of course. But his instinct there, when he gets into that triangle, he drops back. He played the initial ball out wide to Roberts with a nice half volley, and he follows the ball out wide then, and he gets into the triangle. But as soon as the ball comes back from Fulton to Connor Roberts' feet, Dander's on the move. He sees the space in behind the fullback who's marking Roberts, and he darts into it, and that's when Roberts reverses the ball into him. Obviously, he gets away down the wing and crosses it in for Ayew to score. But it's that sort of, and that's where I go back to saying you can't necessarily teach that, because he sees that play developing ahead of it actually happening. He sees the space and he thinks, right, if I go here, I get an opportunity to get in behind the defence. And I do think, as you were saying, that's the sort of trait that benefits when you've got players around you who are prepared to join you, if you like, with that risk taking. And certainly over the last week or so, we're seeing that a bit more with the Swans. It's much nicer to see, isn't it? You might like to see a team have a go a bit. I'd be careful what I say with the next bit, Steve, because I was courtesy of a ban on social media for 24 hours or 12 hours the other day for talking about a Stoke midfielder. But Casey Palmer was in the space of a few minutes became, well, a bit of a hero for Swansea for planting one on James McLean and then scoring or putting his head where it hurt to score the winner, or to score the second goal, I should say, and seal the game. Gito said on the outset, Stoke really underperformed, but I was impressed with his, what should we say, enthusiasm to get the job done.
Yeah, I think, in terms of the challenge, I think if you see a nasty challenge on one of your players, it can be quite nice sometimes if you see someone give a little bit back to him. I remember there was a game a couple of years back where Wales played Denmark in the Nations League.
Yeah.
And I think someone picked on Ethan Ampadu, probably thinking, well, he's 17, 18, I can get away with leaving one on him here. And then a couple of minutes later, Ampadu had him back big time. And I just remember thinking, well, that's sort of like a bit of a statement here, as if to say that maybe you're only young, but you're not going to be able to bully me a bit. And I think Palmer sort of maybe just looked at it and thought, right, well, if he's going to be a bit of a dirty bastard, I'm going to leave one back on him and see how he likes it. So, I think James McLean is never going to be Mr. Popular, is he? For obvious reasons. So that is always going to go down well. It's a bit like when Gorka Pintado nailed Robbie Savage as well, I suppose. Even though I hated Pintado, as I've said many times, he's sort of become like a cult figure just because he laid one on Savage. But no, I mean, as you say, then with the goal as well. I mean, I've already discussed it briefly, hasn't I? But it's one of those balls, isn't it, where you can see he's going to get there first. But there's some players definitely that would probably have shit out of that one. But he didn't. He put his head in there, knowing he'd get hurt, but at the same time probably knowing that if he did, then he would end up scoring, and that's what he did. And then, the 1-0, as safe as it probably was, you could never be entirely certain, can you?
Not against Stoke, mate.
Exactly. Well, I remember earlier this season I watched Spurs play Newcastle. It was as dominant as it gets. And then they got a soft pen in the last minute, Newcastle, to equalise and get a 1-1. And I was watching it and I said, like, this really is just a complete travesty based on the game. And Stoke are definitely the type of team, aren't they, that would probably get one of those against us. So by getting that goal, it ensured that it couldn't happen, which is most welcome, really, because we would have been a disaster if we hadn't ended up winning that based on how the game went.
Not used to the last couple of games, Gito, where I always feel like with the Swans, we've talked about it in this podcast extensively, where we get the goal and we defend for the next 20 minutes, half hour, and we're just sitting there going, we can't just defend for the rest of our lives and just hope, that the opposition don't do anything. And of course, both times we've got the crucial second goal, and obviously the weekend just gone, we got it with plenty of time to spare, which really calmed our nerves. But it's nice, given it's only fair, given what we've said previously, we have to give credit to the team for keeping going and getting the second goal and stop defending for your lives as soon as you go 1-0 up, which is a criticism we've levelled a few times at the team this season.
Yeah,
and before.
We said it last week, didn't we? We said that there's too much of a tendency in this side that when we take the lead, the first instinct is to drop deep and then just protect it at all costs instead of trying to build on the progress that you've already made. But over the last two games, the balance in that respect has been much better, especially against Blackburn. Because I don't think there was any kind of change really in our attitude against Blackburn. We scored a goal and we kept playing the same way we were prior to the goal, the same way which had yielded chances for us and led to that goal. It makes sense that I probably understand him more if we kind of got a goal against the run of play and we're thinking, okay, we got away with one there, let's just protect it. I'd understand that a bit more. But when you are playing well, when you do feel you've got your opponent on the back foot, then keep going, press home that advantage. And the Swans just kept controlling the ball. We weren't going, all out gung ho for the second, but we kept being positive. We kept trying to attack, trying to create, while being solid at the back. And lo and behold, we managed to keep Blackburn out and got a second goal, which wrapped up the 3 points for us. And I thought the balance in that game was much more like it. And I'd hope that's kind of showed us what we can do. We shouldn't be afraid to just keep playing. We are a good team. And we don't have to just park the bus as soon as we take the lead. We are good enough, and we're probably better off. It's probably a safer strategy, actually, to keep giving the opposition something to think about instead of just sitting back and inviting them to attack. So that was really, really encouraging. One of so many positives from the last two games.
Always big believer in that, and I think that's one of the things I've always taken from football is when you get a 1-0 lead, the opposition are going to have to open up against you and come at you. And I think, yes, okay, fair enough. If you want to just make sure the next passage of play doesn't end up in the back of your net and they'll get hit by a sucker punch, but also concentrate on making sure, and I repeated what we said last week, go at them, because then they can't send floods and floods of players up the pitch, because you score a second and it's game, set and match, as we saw yesterday. And it was done for all Blackburn's threat in the first 45 minutes of the game. The second goal in the second half pretty much sealed it for us, and that was a nice feeling to have. So 2 wins, 2 goals in both games, 2 clean sheets, which I think is a big point to mention as well, particularly after the conversation we've had recently about the loss of Joe Roden. So it's really nice to see a positive vibe and energy on the podcast. We did manage to get out a Twitter question for the first time in forever today. So we'll go on to that now. And we asked, quite simply, is our squad strong enough for a promotion push? We had a few responses to this, so thank you to everyone who took the time to get back in touch. First of all, Jonathan Weaver said, if we had an out-and-out goal scorer like Brewster, yes. I got a feeling this will probably be the theme, but we'll carry on. Mark Randall said, looking good at this point in the season. If we recover quickly from the loss of Joe Roden, which we seem to be, no reason why we couldn't have a promotion push. Cooper was hired on the basis of ability to coach youth. Be nice to see our best youth players get some chances. Danny J, with Morgan Gibbs-White out, I'm not quite sure. We've seen the vast improvement performance-wise when we play a proper creative player in the form of MGW. Danda has also been brilliant since coming in. I'd say if we keep our creative players fit, we're certainly on the right track, which of course is what we were talking about just a few minutes ago. Ross Power says the championship this season the games are very tight. Without offence, if we can score enough goals, we have a chance. We've played 3 good teams and only conceded once from a horrific penalty decision. If we get through this week in good shape, I think we are top 2 contenders. Ralph Davis, I still think we're lacking someone to replace Brewster, but there's good cover in every other position, a better squad than last season, and definitely ready to push the promotion. Rhys McMillan, I think we have depth. Our squad is strong, but I would like another option up front. Barini would be nice, but it seems to have gone quiet. Ryan Phillips, Grimes struggling to get back in the side. It's an interesting one we might bring up in a bit. I think it's far too early to say that based on one game, but we'll certainly entertain the idea in a minute. Charlie says 100% strong enough. People can moan about the Roden sale and the price, but the sale has given Cooper a much better squad with greater depth. We're probably a number 9 away from a top 2 push. Hopefully we'll address that in January if still up there. Rodri Owen, yes, although what happens in January will be key in terms of loan signings and any potential sales. Top 6 should be the target, but anything in the top 10 would be acceptable in my opinion. Harry Palmer responds, top 6 should be the minimum ambition now. It's arguably the strongest squad since relegation, and from what I've seen from other teams, I'd be very disappointed if that's not the case. And Rodri Owen says, well, I agree. I imagine that the three that would relegate will be in the mix, but we're certainly as strong as anyone else. I wouldn't necessarily see 7th to 10th as a failure, though. And Nick finally says, we need a clinical finisher, and then yes. So, Gito, a theme arose in the responses there, which I think we followed, in the sense that perhaps to really nail our colours to the mast and say we're promotion contenders, we're perhaps missing a clinical finisher that we had towards the latter end of last season.
I get that. I would point out that West Brom went up last season and their top scorer scored 10 goals. And teams have gone up in the past without having that kind of out and out goal scorer that gets you kind of 20 goals. Neither Leeds nor West Brom had a 20 goal season striker last season, but they both went up. But I definitely get the point. I think if you added somebody like Brewster to their side, I think it would be much more potent still. I think it's too early to say whether we are good enough to be top 2 contenders, because there are a lot of very strong squads in this division. But I definitely think what we've seen in the opening 9 games of the season suggests that this team is ready to make another push for the playoffs. And the depth, I think never before has depth been as important as it is this season. The games are coming thick and fast. We're already seeing clubs making regular changes to the lineup. And we've seen just this week that some clubs can cope with that and some clubs can't. We made 4 changes, I think 3 or 4 changes for the Stoke match. And all of the players who came in were as good as the players they replaced, or even better, you could argue. And Stoke, on the other hand, made 4 changes and they looked a completely different side. They absolutely collapsed pretty much and they couldn't function. So it just goes to show, I think we're looking at Cardiff now, really struggling. Now they've not got Harry Wilson in the team. One player can make all the difference. Whereas I don't think, touch wood, we're in a position where we are overly reliant on any one player at the moment. Obviously, there are some players who are more important than others. I think if we were to lose Gay, that would be a heck of a loss. If we were to lose Ayew, obviously, that would be a loss. There are players that we definitely do not want to lose. But we're in a good position in the sense that there is plenty of depth in pretty much every area of the pitch for us to cope. And I think we're probably better suited than the vast majority of teams in this division, and it could go a very long way to deciding who's in the mix for promotion at the end of the season.
I think Gito is a really good point there, Steve, in that this season, unlike any other, with a constant cycle of Tuesday, Saturday, squad depth is going to make a hell of a lot more difference than it has in previous seasons, and we've seen clubs get promoted having rotated between 16, 17 players all season. It looks now that you're going to have to use the depth of the squad to get through these games. And looking at it, man for man, we do kind of have replacements in almost every position, don't we? Where you could step in and say, I don't think that player is going to let me down today. Yeah,
if you look at it in terms of, if you get an injury like we have with Gibbs White, for example, he's out till January. Like usually, if a player got injured in mid-October out till January, obviously they would miss quite a few games, but he's going to miss like an extra 4 or 5 games probably compared to what he would normally, and it's going to be the same for every player, isn't it? Because the season obviously is condensed by a month, so if you get an injury, you're going to miss more games than you would have normally. So it is going to be quite relentless and for clubs, isn't it? And like you say, squad rotation is going to be huge, which is one thing I'm really pleased that Cooper did the other day, because you just felt that even if you didn't do it short term, it would benefit you to play what you'd regard as your stronger side, but then to catch up with you later in the season, because you're just going to have players that are so tired, basically. So it is going to be big. It's going to favour, for me, probably the relegated clubs, the likes of Norwich, Bournemouth, and Watford, I think, because they probably are going to have probably better squads than a lot of the others. So, you'd fancy them. I know Bournemouth have had a good start anyway, but you would fancy them to sort of come good as the season goes on. Really, they're probably going to have the more depth, aren't they? So, I think if you've got a thin squad, a bit like what we maybe have in the past. I remember the year that we actually did go up to the Premier League. I felt that year our squad was quite thin in terms of quality. There weren't many good replacements. So I think if we were in that situation, for example, we'd find it quite tough this season to mount a realistic challenge that would probably last an entire year because of the depth. But to be fair now, as you say, I think the theme of us being maybe a striker short might be fair. But other than that, we probably are fairly strong in most positions, really. I know, obviously, if one or two of our key players like AU were to go missing, it would be tough to replace him. But I do think that our squad depth is quite good at the moment, so it does give us a reasonable chance. I mean, I know obviously last week I did say that if we don't get playoffs, I wouldn't view it as like a bad season necessarily. We should be looking for top 10 minimum, really. But I think we do have a chance, and obviously the last two games certainly haven't done us any harm to think that we do have a realistic chance of finishing in the top 6.
The last two games hasn't done any harm, Gito. Do you agree with Ross Power, or do you believe, based on Ross Power's tweet, that the next two games will tell us a lot about where we're at, if you like, because they're big games, aren't they, against big, strong teams?
Yeah, we'll get on to discuss them in a bit, but I think we're probably going to be up against a higher level of opponent in Brentford and Norwich than we faced the last week. I mean, in fairness, we were saying last week that we were going to be up against tough teams in Stoke and Blackburn. I think Stoke were massively weakened by the changes they made, and we could see that this season where we think we're going to be playing against a really strong team, but because they make several changes, they're actually a much weaker proposition. I thought Blackburn were definitely a better team than Stoke. There's no doubt about that, and closer to the standard that we're going to see with Brentford and Norwich. But those two teams, I think, are going to be a cut above. Those are two teams that you would expect to be challenging for promotion, and they're probably going to be the toughest opponents that we've faced this season, you would imagine. So, yeah, really big week coming up before the international break.
Yeah, a couple of tweets mentioned, Steve, that the January transfer window, and I guess this is a good point, isn't it, that it really depends on how we're looking as to whether the owners would perhaps stick or twist. Less said about our owners, the better, of course, but in terms of how we're looking at that point, we said it last year, didn't it? It could be an opportunity to push us over the line and cash in on the Premier League cash cow and sell the club, which I think is their end goal now. But it would be interesting to see. I think a few of the tweets mentioned it, that if we do get as far as January and we are up there and thereabouts, would that be the time, if Barini, the unattached player we can still bring in, doesn't happen, that would be the time perhaps look for those sorts of reinforcements?
Well, I know one or two mentioned about loans. Well, we've got 5 loans, so as far as I'm concerned, I don't think any loan players are going to come in unless Bristol City recall Casey Palmer. As far as I'm concerned, the other players are probably all going to stay for the season. So, I don't think we're going to do much in January, is my honest opinion. I can't see us really spending a great deal of money. So then that means you're relying on free transfers. Obviously, there probably will be more free transfers available in January than ever before, because obviously there's a lot of clubs now carrying smaller squads because they just can't afford to carry bigger ones because of this playing behind closed doors. But I mean, if we want anyone who's available on a free transfer like Barini, I mean, let's do it now, because if we sign someone on a free transfer in January, then they've not played for months. It's going to take them ages to get up to speed. So as far as I'm concerned, we need to do it now if we're going to do anything like that. I think we are a striker short, as I've said. So with Barini, if they were willing to do some sort of a deal where he wasn't on a stupid wage, it probably wouldn't be the worst business in the world. So, January, though, I don't think much is going to happen, if I'm honest with you. But we'll wait and see. Yeah,
Ryan Phillips mentioned Gito. Grimes, I think we agree this is part of the rotation. We found, I'm sure you, as everyone really, was surprised, having started every game under Steve Cooper, that Grimes would have just been one of those ones who was deemed undroppable, etc. But he did get rested on the weekend, and I felt like we talked about it on the outset, yeah, that this was a near enough 90 minutes performance, a team that really looked like they handled it professionally. Game management, you mentioned, in the way that they addressed the threat of Blackburn. And without necessarily saying that Grimes had been dropped, would there be any cause, barring the rotation for rest and stuff, to leave any of those midfield three out in the next few games?
I don't think anybody's done anything wrong in that period, but I think I'd expect Grimes to come back in. I mean, not only is he captain, I think actually over the last few games he's had some of his best performances of the season. I thought he was really good against Bristol City last week. That was probably his best performance of the season up until that point. So I don't think Grimes was dropped based on form. I don't think he's been spectacularly good for most of the season, but I don't think he's been particularly bad either. I think he's been somewhere in the middle, the kind of performances that we've come to expect from him. And actually, if the team, I think we saw from Grimes at the tail end of last season, when the team is actually really playing well and playing with confidence, you get a very different Matt Grimes. And I think he would actually enjoy playing in this kind of side, where he can maybe spread a few passes, where he can get a bit more involved in attacks, etc. I think it would suit him, actually, this kind of play. And I'd be very surprised if he doesn't come in for the Brentford Norwich games. The question is, who is he going to come in for? I mean, Smith, I would say, is the obvious one to go, but will Steve Cooper feel against better opposition that we need to be a bit more coy and go? I wouldn't want to see it happen, but him picking Grimes to
that midfield three again.
Well, yeah, exactly, ahead of Dander or Palmer, which I don't think is the right way to go. But I mean, you can see Steve Cooper doing it, can't you?
Yeah, good point. We'll be very interested to see. So that was all the responses. Well, there was a fair few in there. So thanks, everyone, for getting in touch to that. And also keep an eye on it. We will try and get another Twitter question out next week. But if we don't, then keep an eye. There's plenty of stuff going on our Twitter account anyway. Right, let's move on to the next part of the podcast, which is one of my favourite parts, I won't lie. It's the games part we brought in this season. We start off with unpopular opinion, which, if you haven't listened to it before, one of us three bring an unpopular opinion to the podcast. A lot of people won't agree with it. Some of you will. But after the person brings it, we get to chat about it for a few minutes and see where we end up, if they can twist their arm and make us agree. This week's turn is Gitto. I think we know what this one's going to be based on previous conversations, but Gitto, your unpopular opinion.
Ireland, Northern Ireland, Israel, Portugal, Scotland, Wales and England. What have these countries all got in common? They are the only UEFA nations which have a second cup competition. For anybody who knows me and has been, I've made this point very clear. This is going to be a very unpopular opinion, especially among Swansea fans. I would scrap the League Cup. This is an opinion I have held for a long time. It is an opinion I held when we actually won the thing back in 2013. It is an opinion I held even when we were on a European tour the following season. And it is an opinion I definitely still hold. Why on earth do we still need a second cup competition? It was only brought in 1960, basically, so the clubs could make money off of their floodlights, because there weren't many midweek matches back then. So they could justify their use of floodlights a bit more. It brought a bit of cash in. It was a bit of a joke competition back in 1960. And let's face it, has much changed in that time. The rest of Europe, who actually had a second cup competition, they've come to the conclusion that they don't need it. Bulgaria, Denmark, Finland, France, Germany, Greece, Latvia, Poland, Russia, they've all got rid of their equivalent of the League Cup. Why haven't we? Some people say, but it's tradition. It's part of this country's tradition. It was only made in 1960. It's a year older than my dad. I mean, Tony Pulis is older than the League Cup, and I don't think anybody advocates keeping him in football for tradition's sake. It's. I think the time has come for us to just accept that actually, at a time when we play too much football as it is, the fixture list is absolutely packed. Why on earth do we need another cup competition? There are arguments that are given. I mean, Steve has said it before. Sorry to pick on you, Steve. But they say, it's a great way for a club like Swansea to get into the Europa League. Is it, though? Because the Swans are very much the exception rather than the rule. The Swans were the last team from outside the top 6 to qualify to win the League Cup. I mean, I think a lot of people look at it and think, it's, this is the cup competition that the smaller clubs have a chance of winning. But the stats don't add up. We don't. And actually, statistically, a club like Swansea has a better chance of qualifying for Europe through the league than through the League Cup. I mean, since 2013, Wigan, Hull, West Ham, Southampton, Burnley and Wolves have all qualified for the Europa League. None of them did it through the League Cup. And people will say, it's a money spinner for clubs. Well, we have that in the FA Cup, really, don't we? You don't need more than one cup competition. And I actually think the League Cup devalues the FA Cup, because when you have too many cup games in a season, but managers we've seen already, they just send out their second team. It turns into a reserve competition. Nobody really takes it seriously until the kind of quarter-final, semi-final stage. And even at that point, how many clubs actually take it seriously? And if a competition isn't taken seriously, then what is the point of it exactly? If you look at attendances, they're pretty pitiful. I mean, I think last season there were 90 games in the League Cup and only 18 of them saw an attendance above the home team's average attendance for the league that season. So, I mean, the statistics suggest the fans aren't really interested. And no matter what anybody says, people aren't packing out stadiums to watch League Cup matches. Most League Cup matches are played in half-empty or far worse stadiums. There were some games where the stadiums were only 15% full compared with the average league capacity, not even compared with full capacity with the average league attendance. Fans don't care, players don't care, managers don't care, clubs don't care. Why don't we actually scrap the League Cup, put everything into the FA Cup, which is a genuinely fantastic historic competition with fantastic tradition, with prestige, which the League Cup could never have? Why don't we focus on actually protecting the FA Cup, making that the competition we all want it to be, and just do what every other country almost in Europe has done and cut this nonsense of a second cup competition, because it's pointless.
Wow. Well, that was a robust argument. I'm struggling to find argument with it. Steve, I'll let you have a go first, because if nothing else, Gito sure as hell did his research there to come back with any rebuttals we might have had. He's already answered them, hasn't he?
That was the type of thing I'd expect Paul Amendonato say, purely because Cardiff had won the FA Cup and we won the League Cup.
What I will say about attendances to an extent, Gito, is, I mean, it's an extra cost, isn't it? And they're always midweek night games. I'm sure a lot of that adds into the FA Cup as well, particularly earlier rounds. I don't think you get nearly as much of a league attendance for those games, especially when they're played on a Tuesday night and you have to pay an extra tenner. Do
you really think the FA Cup games get like great crowds though either? Because I think League Cup, let's use an example, say now Swindon are home to Chelsea or something like that. Like Swindon obviously would get a full house, but those games are few and far between in either competition, if you know what I mean. I think there's a problem with both. I can understand the FA Cup probably appeals more because it does play on weekends and stuff like that, but I mean, one thing I will say about the League Cup especially, it's better to make the final in that than the FA Cup, because you get more tickets. In the FA Cup, all the tickets are bloody stolen by the FA, aren't they? When you get about I don't know, just over half the ground with the actual fans of either club. So that's definitely one good thing with the League Cup, I would say. Is
that a reason to keep the competition, just that clubs get?
No, maybe not. I think it's probably more that I'm highlighting a problem with the FA Cup, if that makes sense. Yeah. And I don't like the fact with the FA Cup that the semi-finals are played at Wembley. That's another thing that I think is pretty shit. I don't have a problem with the League Cup, to be honest. I mean, most of the big sides, yeah, like I say, if they're going to moan about it, which they always do, it means they play lesser side. It doesn't matter. For me, it is a genuine help still to the lesser teams, because I mean, if they get a decent draw in it, they'll, as I've said, they will get a big crowd of it. And I think scrapping it again would just be pandering to the big teams. So I definitely don't think it should be scrapped. And the biggest argument of all, no League Cup, no Valencia away. End of argument.
Well, you say that. But when the Swans, going into that match, the League Cup final against Bradford, the Swans were only 3 points off the European spots. If we'd actually taken the Liverpool game at Anfield the previous week a bit more serious, perhaps we would actually be in the European spot on that weekend. Actually, we may have had just as good a chance of making the European places through the league as through the cup, but we won.
Didn't our form tail off as well a bit, Gito, after the win in the League Cup?
We completely took our foot off the pedal.
Well, we won the next week, didn't we? You could argue more that we got to 40 points and took our foot off the gas, as opposed to possibly the fact that we'd won the cup, I reckon.
Possibly. If you add to what Gito's saying, if you're hitting 40 points and you're a couple of points off European qualification, that in itself doesn't justify perhaps the foot off the gas. You're not necessarily at 37 points in January thinking we got to get this win to survive. You're almost pretty much there anyway, aren't you? Does that justify the foot off the gas at that stage? I don't think it does. I think to be fair to Gito there, my counter argument on this, I've mentioned it in a previous podcast, is that the League Cup could do with reform, but for the reasons Gito stated excellently, very little chance of a smaller club winning it, and it is still tailored towards one of your big six just taking on the trophy.
Maybe not winning it. Fans. But what I was going to say though is, I think like last season Villa made the final. I mean, after we made the final once, I know Southampton have made the final. And I think the Sunderland have made a final. Birmingham have won it. This has all happened in the last decade. So, I know obviously the bigger teams have tended to win it, but at the same time, there have been instances where lesser sides have made the final. I know those sides are probably disappointed they didn't win, but they've still made the final. They wouldn't declare the competition a waste of time. So, I still think there is something about making a Wembley final, certainly.
Yeah, there is. I mean, but if you're coming up against, you'll always have a Wigan versus Man City moment. But if you're coming up against one of the biggest teams in a cup final, you're expecting, and they do often finish with, 3-0 wins, 4-0 wins. So you see some of these wins then when you're thinking it's all being geared towards, can they cause the biggest cup sets? Can they go and take the trophy from the jaws of the, giant, massively multi-billionaire owned club? And 99 times out of 100 it doesn't happen, does it? And I think that does play into what Gito says. If you hadn't heard it before, my argument for League Cup was that maybe anyone who's qualified for Europe through the league or through winning the League Cup that year even cannot then participate in the following season. Therefore, you'll never get holders, if you like, or defending champions, because they'll automatically not qualify for the next year. But that automatically then takes out the top four. It automatically takes out the ones that won it last season. You're always going to get fresh meat. You're always going to get fresh teams winning. And if European football is the prize at the end of it, I think that spices it up and makes it a lot more of a worthy competition, because then it really is anyone's. Yes, you're going to have your mid-table Premier League teams competing, but those are beatable on any given day. Whereas when you're playing against your Chelseas, Man Uniteds and Arsenals, chances are you're going to come up short. So I think there's room for reform. Gito, if they did bring in something similar to what I've suggested there, would that sway you into thinking, well, this is now a far more interesting competition?
I think that would depend on how clubs react to it. I mean, it could go one of two ways. Either clubs actually think, oh yeah, this is suddenly a competition that we should take seriously because it does give us a chance of winning it. Or I mean, what I suspect may happen then is that they'd say, well, if the top clubs aren't involved, then this clearly isn't a competition that's worth winning. So why should we bother really if it's not got?
But Europe is still a profile to be gained for any club outside of the top 10, no?
Yeah, well, you say that, but a lot of clubs we've seen with like Southampton, for example, they qualified for Europe and then they didn't really take it seriously and they went out, very early.
West Ham did as well a couple of years ago, didn't they? It must be absolutely infuriating for the fans.
Because fans
and Burnley.
Fans want to be in Europe. Fans want the kind of run that the Swans had in Europe. We did take it seriously. We really did do our best to get as far as possible in Europe, and we had a great time doing it. And I think a lot of clubs are jealous of that kind of run because they would love to see their team get into the kind of knockout stages, or even get the group stages of the Europa League. A lot of these clubs have exited before even reaching the group stage. You've been denied a great European tour there. But the sad reality is that while a lot of clubs are kind of focused, the Premier League is split into two categories almost. It's split into teams who are totally obsessed with staying up in the Premier League and just getting to 40 points, and clubs who are totally obsessed with getting into the Champions League. And there isn't really a middle ground who are saying, do you know what, let's really target the Europa League. Let's really make an effort to get into Europe, because a lot of clubs just see it as a hassle.
Yeah, I agree. I remember Burnley a few years ago when they everyone talked about how amazing their season was, and they got into Europe, and wow, they still transformed Burnley. They never even qualified. If you're not even gonna, if you're not gonna throw all your eggs in that basket then and say, do you know what, we've spent 5 or 6 years in the Premier League, but this may not come around again for another generation. This is something now we've got to throw everything at and really go for it. West Ham, another one that springs to mind. It would absolutely infuriate me as a fan, knowing how much we celebrated getting into it, and how the teams think, oh, we got European football back at Upton Park, at here, at there, Turf Moor, etc. We got it. It's amazing. We put ourselves on the national stage, and then bang, don't even qualify. It's a really good.
Let's use an example. As I know it's a little bit older now, but look, Fulham and Middlesbrough both made the Europa League final, didn't they? Now, I'm not saying that maybe those sides, the other sides we're talking about, could do that, but I mean, if you ask those fans, they'll talk incredibly probably about that. Probably the best time they've ever had following their club.
I think that as a fan, you absolutely want to go as far as you can in Europe. As you know, with Wales away, Steve, it's a trip, isn't it? It's a novel trip where you don't get to do it every week. It's a change from the norm. Sometimes you go into sunnier climes. You're going to 3-day benders and stuff like that, and it's great. And I think as fans, invariably, you want to do well in it. No one's saying, do you know what, I hope we get knocked out in the qualifiers here because, we've got Burnley at home on the weekend and it's a big 3 points. I don't think at that point you're really thinking about those games. You really want to do well. But clubs see 150, 200 million pot of gold at the end of every season at the Premier League, and they see a paltry amount in comparison for winning the Europa. Even if you're not even going to win it, you're going to get, hundreds of thousands by comparison. Do you know what I mean? I think clubs are run as businesses now, and fans invariably, as you say, Steve, fans of the Fulhams and the Middlesbroughs, they will always say the qualifying and the getting through to the final of the Europa League was incredible experiences.
Yeah, so I know with Newcastle, I know Newcastle fans especially get really annoyed about this because they never take the cup seriously, do they? I think it's not quite as bad now as it was, but they went through a spell of getting knocked out in the FA Cup in the third round pretty much every year. And I'm sure that there was like a fanzine editor there. It was like, because Mike Ashley had said something about, Europe's not that appealing or whatever. And I think he sarcastically tweeted, oh, no, we don't want European trips. And then he had photos of there's literally an entire behind the goal of the San Siro is full of Newcastle fans. And then I think they're at the new camp and then they're at one or two other places. And you think to yourself, like, who the hell doesn't want this?
Exactly.
Like, you could never understand. I know I heard some of our fans who didn't want it, for example, and just think to myself, well, what are you in football for then? Why don't you want this? It's literally, there's nothing better. Anyone that went to a European game will tell you that as well. It's about the memories and the experiences that you get with it and that are irreplaceable. So, yeah, if you don't want it, then it's like what I always say, if you didn't want it, basically, you were not in Valencia. It's as simple as that.
I think one thing we all agree on is that clubs should all take European qualification a lot more seriously, and should.
So they're fans.
Yeah, it's for the experience, for everything. I mean, it's what it's all about. And yeah, it must be heartbreaking to be a club that qualifies for Europe and then the club just doesn't take it seriously, and you go out in the early stages. They're denying their fans a great opportunity.
Absolutely. Well, that was a really good argument, Gito, unpopular opinion. I think I'm probably sticking with my original point, even though you've brought up very, very valid points, that I think the League Cup could do is reform, but it does offer a way into Europe for smaller clubs potentially with reform. Not now, perhaps, but I think rather than scrap it, they just need to change it up a bit. Steve, what are your passing thoughts on Gito's argument about the League Cup?
I do sort of see some of the arguments, but I definitely wouldn't scrap it. I think the reform maybe isn't a bad idea, but no, I don't want to see big clubs get their way again because I'm a little bit sick of it. I think, like I say, it'd be good if someone different could win it and maybe get that European place. That would probably benefit it. Whether some clubs wouldn't take it seriously then or not, I don't know. But I think they'd be mad personally if they didn't, because it's a trophy and it's potentially to test yourself in Europe. And like I said, we've already said it in terms of fans, then fans definitely want that, don't they?
One thing I will say about Europe, which we don't mention very often, but Thursday, Sunday, it kills the joy of football, doesn't it? It does.
It's not great. Don't get me wrong, that Thursday, Sunday thing, but it infuriates me when pundits use that as the excuse. I remember pointing out last year that Wolves played somewhere away on a Thursday night and then on the Sunday went to the Etihad and won against Man City, and I was thinking to myself, I bet all those pundits now had that lined up, or you know, Thursday, Sunday, you're never gonna go to Man City anyway. I actually did a piece in the fanzine about this where I looked at our fixtures after Europa League games, and we actually didn't do too badly at all. The games we lost was stuff like we lost at Man City, we lost there every year in the Prem, we lost at Anfield. Yeah, again, we pretty much went there every time and lost. And I think a lot of the other ones we picked up decent results. Although the only time I felt where it really affected us was we played Crystal Palace at home and after Napoli away, and the first half was really good, and in the second half we were looked out on our feet and we ended up not winning when we were winning half time. So that's the only time it did, but it cost us 2 points. That's a very small price to pay. It's I don't think it actually affects teams anywhere near as much as what's made out.
Yeah, very interesting to see the full stats on that. Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Gito, for that unpopular opinion. We'll be bringing it back next. Steve, it's your turn for the next pod, so get your thinking cap on. We move on now. You've got one already, have you?
I've got one. It's going to be an interesting one after what we just discussed.
You're going to argue for losing the League Cup as well after saying that, are you?
No, not losing the League Cup, obviously. But although that would be funny just to hear Gito's rage. But no,
gas.
I am. I've got an interesting opinion.
Okay, right. We'll save ourselves for that. Then now we come back to the quiz. Current score 3-1 to Steve over the first 4 quizzes. Gito, chance to get back in with a shout here. These are the rules. I've set them down. It's 2 points for a correct answer, -1 for an incorrect answer, which is then passed over for a no risk bonus point for the other player. So with that in mind, here we go. Shout your name out if you know the answer. Question 1. Ben Cabango scored his second goal of the season on Saturday after a goal in a 2-1 win over Millwall earlier in October. But who was his only other league goal against? Steve just got in there in time.
I think it was Birmingham last season.
It was Birmingham. Well done. Correct. Question 2. I hope you were paying attention, by the way, because these questions are very heavily weighted in terms of the games we've just watched. Name the starting 11 from Saturday.
Gito.
Go on then, Gito.
Woodman in goal, Roberts, Norton, Cabango, Gay and Bidwell, Fulton and Smith, Danda in front of them, Ayew and Lowe.
Brilliant. Spot on. So we're all level. 2 points apiece. Question 3. to within 5 minutes, how many game minutes, that's excluding the 15-minute halftime break, were between the goals on Saturday? So you've got a 5-minute grace there if anyone wants to take a pop at it. Nobody? Go on, someone have a go.
Gito.
Oh, you're going to go? Okay. I was just going to hand it back, but okay, if you want to go for it.
I'll go for 25.
Oh,
I was going to say 35 I was going to go for. I thought you would
have been very close, Steve. Actually, it was 36 minutes.
Damn it.
And you've handed it over to you, Steve, actually, by that. So you would have got the point, so I'll give it to you, because you did give me the correct answer. So it's an extra point for Steve there. So it's 3-2 to Steve going into the fourth question. To within 5, this is another scalable one. Add up the shirt numbers of the starting back 5 against Blackburn. That's not including Freddie Woodman. You got a 5 grace here. I'll give you a few seconds to have a think about it. How's your maths going, gents?
Appalling.
Are you working it out, Steve, or are you just completely...
I think I've got it, so I'll go for it.
Go on then.
Is it 122?
you just can't compete with that, can you?
No.
Spot on. Absolutely spot on.
I was thinking about that. The amount, there's 3 players in the 40s, isn't it? That's ridiculous.
Yeah. I was thinking as soon as we got to Cabango, I was like, there we go. I'm giving Steve can have this one.
You're getting the abacus out. And finally, question 5. So what are we at? We are at 5-2 at the moment.
I think I'm already lost. Right?
You can pull a draw here because it's 3 points if you get this on the first clue. This is a who am I, as is always with the last question. So I just throw it in here. Who am I? Clue 1. I am a former captain and player manager. Throwing it in? Or am I going to go to clue 2?
I might as well guess.
Jump in.
I'm going to go Cusack.
Nick Cusack. Correct.
Bloody hell.
Out of the bag. He's pulled it out of the bag. The other clues were won a league under my captaincy, and I was the chairman of the PFA for a time. Which
you did well there, because you could have gone Martinez. I thought that was the obvious one.
I think I could have gone Toshak as well. I think.
I don't know if he was a captain. Was he? Was the other one possibly Molby?
Molby might have been the captain at the time as well.
Yeah, I'm not convinced Molby was a captain. He may have been, though.
Yeah.
But then again, I'm looking at I don't know, like the Wembley game, for example. That we.
I'm sure he wore the captain's armband.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise. It would be a little bit dull, wouldn't it, if the manager's playing and someone else is giving orders.
Well, it was a shot in the dark that you needed to take it, though, the way the scores were bearing up, and you took it. So, fortune favours the brave and all that. 5-5 it finishes, which is a dead heat. So I haven't got a tiebreaker question. We'll call it a draw. So yeah, you at the end of the day, you had a go-get, didn't you? Congratulations. Still stays 3-1 of the season. It was a few candidates there, so you had a go, and you come out on top. The last part of this quiz section is, Joe, I haven't said it enough. I haven't said that was called This Swan's a Toughie. We all love it. Ghetto, I know you're a particular fan of it. I keep calling it the quiz now, but it's called This Swan's a Toughie. I bloody copyrighted and trademarked the bloody thing, and I don't mention it anymore. The last section of this is Battle Jacks. It's quite popular with our listeners. This is, of course, where I give a statement out, and Steve and Ghetto get to decide amongst themselves, or rather over the course of a coin toss, whether or not they are for or against the statement. And then they have to argue it for 45 seconds. Simple as that. Not necessarily their personal opinions, just the one that the coin toss has decided they have to have. Gito, you chose last week. Steve, heads or tails?
I'll go heads.
It's tails. So, Gito, you get to choose on this statement whether you wish to be pro or against. The statement is as follows. The homegrown rule isn't making British players better through exposure. It's just making the standard of quality worse.
I'll go 4, I guess. Yeah.
Go for. That leaves Steve with against. Gito, as you're arguing for the statement, you get to go first. It's 45 seconds. Starts now.
Basically, look back to like years gone by, back in the 60s, 50s, 70s, etc., when it was pretty much entirely homegrown players that were playing. When you look back at the footage, the football was rubbish. Like the Premier League, the top division, Division 1 back then, looked like League 1 right now, if we're being honest. It was long ball, it was uncultured. Foreign players give us so much in the game. And if we are saying no to them and saying, oh, no, we got to concentrate on inferior Welsh, English, Scottish players, then the game is clearly going to suffer, isn't it? And the standard of football isn't going to get better. We're just letting poorer players play. It's protectionism, but it's absolutely rubbish. It's not going to actually... Good. I was running out of arguments there.
Good starting statement. I think you come up with the one you wanted this week. Steve, you've got 45 seconds to argue why that is complete tosh. On your marks, off you go.
I think every club should have an X amount of homegrown players. The fact is, the crowd love to see homegrown players. There's no reason whatsoever why every club can't have them. Manchester United have this proud record since the 1930s of always having a homegrown player in the matchday squad. I can't imagine that any club would not want to have an honour like that. And the fact is that you haven't got to play that many of them. I think the rule in the Championship actually is that you only have to have one homegrown player in your squad. So it's not going to do any harm, is it? That even if you have someone that's maybe not quite ready for the first team, you should. But at the end of the day, everyone should. You look at the Swans in recent years, some of the most popular players, like Sir Connor Roberts, Ben Cabango, Joe Rodon, Dan James, Ollie McBurney, they've come through our system and they've been our better players, if we're being honest. So for me, I definitely think...
I think I made a bad choice this week.
I think, to be honest, I think you did. I was quite pleased you didn't go down that route.
I couldn't think. I was like, am I for or against this? I'll just go for one of them. And then I heard your arguments. I was like, yeah, those are the arguments that I should have been making, really.
Oh, it's good.
You should have stitched me right up.
The Twitter audience will decide, as always, who they agree with. So the question was, the homegrown rule isn't making British players better through exposure, it's just making the standard of quality worse. This will go up on Twitter. Let us know what you think, and we'll have a little poll on it, as we always do, and we'll decide. Gito, you won by a landslide on the last podcast, so congratulations. We should do, maybe in fairness, we should perhaps do a league table for this, but because it's a toss of a coin, it feels a little bit unfair if someone has been stitched up with a question they have to defend. But it's another win for you, Gito. So Battle Jacks is faring you well at the moment. Do you think it's going to carry on after this pod? No? Are you still there?
What is going to carry on after this pod?
Do you think your Battle Jacks form?
My Battle Jacks record? No, it's not. I think I've basically, I've cocked it up this week.
You think this is an own goal? We'll see. We don't get to decide. The audience get to decide. Well, that's it for the quizzes. Hope you enjoyed them. We'll move on now back to the Swans, back talking football, and moving on to the games coming up. They are two very difficult games. We'll analyse the one coming up on Tuesday night away. Steve, it's Brentford. It's the team that were going up last season, without a shadow of a doubt, thanks to their floppy head manager, who I think has become a bit of a firm favourite with Swans faithful, hasn't he? But they're not. They're still in the Championship, and it's a chance to it's just a shame the fans aren't there, really, isn't it? Because it might have been a bit of an interesting one, a nice one to go to. But no, instead it'll be to be watched from our TV screens. Brentford is going to be a very difficult game, though.
Yeah, it would have been quite nice, wouldn't it, if we could have been allowed to go. Would have been nice to give some a boost to Thomas Frank, all deserved, of course, because his arrogance was off the scale, really, wasn't it? So I think a lot of people were quite pleased that Brentford didn't go up in the end. They've had a reasonable start to the season, but they seem to be coming good at the moment. Obviously, they had a good win against Luton yesterday, a comfortable one. They've lost, a couple of players, which they said that they wouldn't because they were going up. So I was naturally devastated that Ben Rama and Watkins ended up leaving then. But they brought in Ivan Toney from Peterborough. He's made quite a good start. He's scored a few goals already. I was a little bit surprised in some ways that Brentford didn't think to themselves on the day that Ben Rama left, which was deadline day, to go in there for Harry Wilson, really, because I thought that would have been perfect for them as a replacement. But obviously they didn't do it for whatever reason. But look, they're going to be quite strong again, I think. Like I said, they've not made the greatest of starts to the season, but that was probably their weakness last year as well, wasn't it? They became good around the time of when they taught us a bit of a lesson at the Liberty, beating us 3-0 in October, I think. And after that, they probably picked up more points than anybody else in the division. So maybe they're just a little bit slow out of the blocks. But, they seem to be coming good now. So, look, it's going to be a difficult game. It's the same with Norwich, really. It's, it's going to be 2 hard games for us. We might learn quite a bit about us over the next week and just what our prospects are going to be like for the season. So, yeah, it's a tough week coming up.
First time we've really spoken about it, Gitto, since the playoff semi-finals. Of course, around about the time where it was all unfolding in front of us, we were 9th, 10th, looking like we were going to miss out. There were some very sloppy defeats after lockdown, games we really should have won, points we were throwing away left, right and centre. I'm sure we even said on this pod that, God, look at Brentford. They've won 6 on the bounce. They're doing this, that and the other. I really hope. Wouldn't it be amazing if they go up? They play amazing football. I really like them. And I probably just quoted myself there and how that turned on its head after we managed to sneak into the playoffs and somehow Brentford contrived to not get into the top 2, which it looked for all the last 3 or 4 weeks leading up to it that they were going to get there, and then they threw it away, and then I think the pressure started to tell perhaps to Brentford, and that's where the arrogance perhaps come through and maybe some overconfidence. It didn't go down well in these parts.
No, I think Brentford last season were a club that everybody liked until you actually came up against them and more precisely come to know the manager. I think Thomas Frank has done a good job there. Don't get me wrong, he's a good coach, but his personality really does grind people the wrong way. There's no doubt about that. We saw it when he played against us. There is plenty there to dislike in just the way he is. He's a classic footballing pantomime villain. The footballing philosophies are totally different, but there is a bit of Warnock there, that he's very easy to dislike. And there's something good about that you need those kind of people in football, I think. But yeah, he did. He did it to a couple of clubs last season, and he definitely did it to us. And like Steve said,
Leeds, another one. I think they had a bit of a problem with him, didn't they?
You do not want to wind up Leeds as fans either, because when things go wrong, like it did for Brentford at the end of last season, they will come back and they will be relentless in their abuse.
They were.
They are a peculiar bunch, Leeds fans. They really are, but they are relentless. They're like I don't know. They're like an alligator. Like once they bite onto something, they do not let go. They just grab hold and do not let it go. But on the point of the pressure, it is worth remembering. I don't think they're entirely over that Brentford, the kind of shakiness that we saw from them. They did throw away that automatic promotion push right at the end, just when they had a chance to put it in their own hands. They bottled it spectacularly and allowed West Brom to go up automatically. And then came to playoffs. Obviously, it looked like they may have been doing it against us as well. But in fairness to them, they really brought their A game for the semi-final second leg. But anybody who watched the final, I don't think there's any doubt that Brentford just didn't turn up. Fulham did a number on them, definitely. But Brentford were way off the pace in that final. And already this season, I think we've seen plenty of examples of games where Brentford have just not turned up. There have been plenty of examples as well where they really have turned up and they've destroyed the opposition, like they did against Huddersfield, like they did in the last game against Luton, where they've just been way too good. and have got the result they deserve. But there are games where they've switched off and where they've made mistakes. They were 2-0 up against Preston and ended up losing 4-2, sorry, which is quite remarkable. They were 3 goals down against Stoke, I think it was last week. I mean, they came back to make it 3-2 and make it look a bit more respectable. But, I mean, it was quite shocking to see Stoke 3 goals up against Brentford. So there is a bit of vulnerability there. There's no doubt about it. I don't think and while I think we have to respect Brentford because they're a fantastic football team, I think we also have to acknowledge there are weaknesses there, and there is perhaps a little bit of a soft underbelly that shows from time to time.
Maybe prematurely, I said in the pre-season predictions that Brentford may suffer a playoff heartache hangover. Steve, as Gitto alluded to there may be a little bit of it in the early showings, but as you said, it was something that happened last season, not obviously a playoff heart, but a slower start, which they picked up from later on. And there's no doubt that they're going to be one of the bigger hitters, certainly, I should imagine, in the top 6 when the season draws to a close. I'd be surprised if they weren't. And Cooper will know this. And, of course, having come up against them so recently and all the fanfare around them moving into the new stadium, etc., Cooper will look to, no doubt, try and get the result first and foremost. But how do you approach this? Given the fact that since we've adopted a more creatively loose style, if you like, giving a bit of more freedom to the players and giving those sorts of players a game where they can go and express themselves, we're picking up these 2-goal wins and stuff, and we're looking a bit more confident, a bit more professional, a bit more, being able to manage games better. Do you then revert to type and say, batten down the hatches and see if we can sneak a point? Because for my money, yes, there's a risk in doing so, but the team deserves an opportunity to showcase just how good they are coming up against the Brentford. It'll be a risk, but I believe personally that it's a risk that we need to take.
I am a little bit concerned we might revert to playing with 3 holding players, and if we do that, we're not going to create much, and it's immediately telling us really that the manager doesn't really trust us to go toe to toe with them, and is taking the view of we want to come out here with a draw. Yeah, and I don't necessarily think that's the case in this division. Like, I do think that Brentford probably on paper may have a better side than us, but that doesn't mean we can't get a result. I mean, you look at Gitto mentioned Preston went there and beat them 4-2, and Preston are definitely not a better side than Brentford. I mean, I think they haven't picked up a point at home yet all season, so that says it all about that result being all the more remarkable. So, I think I wouldn't say the formation that we're playing right now is especially attacking anyway. It's probably like quite a balanced formation. So I think we should stick with it. If he does want to rotate it a little bit, I think that's, understandable because of the amount of games that we've got. But I certainly think that either Dander or Palmer should be started in like a number 10 role. We should not be playing with 3 cautious midfield players, because if we do that, we're not going to create much. We're probably going to end up sitting quite deep. And inevitably, in the end, I thought the pressure will tell. So, I do have a fear that we might actually go down this route, but I sincerely hope that we don't.
Gitto, are you of the same opinion? I mean, we can go toe to toe, and we've shown that, haven't we? We can go toe to toe with teams in this division. We don't have to cower, and maybe it's about time we showed some, balls and showed confidence and faith in who we are and what potential we have.
I think the way to beat Brentford is the way we did in the semi-final first leg last year, the way Fulham did it. You have to be solid. You have to be disciplined. There are going to be times where you come under pressure and you're going to have to just ride it out, but you have to maintain a threat. And if you do actually, keep that threat intact, then you're going to get chances against Brentford. They do fall asleep. They do give you the odd opportunity in a game to score, and you've just got to be good enough to take your chances when those chances arrive. So I hope that it's not just a bus parking exercise, and I hope that we do go there looking to carry a constant threat. And again, it is just about finding the balance. I don't want us to go there and go gung ho and just go all out attack, because we'll be picked off and we'll be beaten. There's no doubt about that. But likewise, I don't want to go there and just invite pressure, because if we just sit back for 90 minutes and tell Brentford, go on, you try and do something, they're going to do something. They're going to find one cross that finds Ivan Toney. They're going to get one break that they'll pick the bottom corner, and from that point on, the game plan's gone. So it's all about balance, like we said, and right now it feels like we're getting the balance just right, and I think it's a balance that could work consistently against most teams in this division, and that includes Brentford.
I think the league win against us last season for me was far more impressive than their playoff semi-final. I think that second leg was down to us making some horrendous defensive mistakes, and they took advantage, and credit to them, but there was 2 or 3 horror shows in there that we got punished for, and you just thought, well, hold your hands up, we weren't the better team on the night, and that's it. But I think sometimes that gets lost through time, and you just think, oh, Brentford battered us. But in reality, if we were solid and as well, solid is probably the word, as we feel like we are recently, and a lot more sturdy in defence, that you feel like perhaps maybe we don't have those errors in the game, touch wood, as I do it, say that now, that we can go to, and they're not the same team as we said on the outset. They have lost a few players. Yes, they traditionally look in recent years to replace well, and Ivan Toney looks like he'll be a shrewd purchase as the season pans out, but it's not the same team, and they're not necessarily world beaters. The start of the season suggests that, doesn't it? I think they've got 14 points, is it, so far? They're not knocking the door of the top 2 at the moment, and maybe it's a good time to play a Brentford, Steve, before, if they do pick up a run of form as the season reads on. Well, maybe now's a good time to get the result in, or get a chance to a result against them before that happens.
Yeah, I mean, it could be, couldn't it? Like I said, I think they will start to come good quite soon. I probably would have preferred to have played them, very early in the season when that hangover was probably there, and also obviously they're still bedding into what is a new stadium, and that can sometimes take a little bit of time as well. So it's difficult to say, isn't it? But I mean, the way we're playing, we can't be too fearful about playing them at this stage, but at the same time, it's a difficult game, isn't it? There's I put it this way: if you said to me right now we will come away with a point, I would be quite happy with that. I just hope that if we do end up coming away with a point, it's not because we've parked the bus, essentially.
It wouldn't be nice, would it, if it was like a Coventry game where you would think you've gone there and you've just been torn apart and somehow come away with a point. We talked before recording on a different topic entirely, but we were just chatting about football and saying that really we want to be entertained. You want to enjoy it. You want football to be ambitious. You want to try and see if you can get fans excited. And I think maybe over the past 10, 12 years, Gito, we've been spoiled in that regard, and that's tended to be the type of football we've played, and the type of football that certainly our generation has become accustomed to. Yes, we experienced the drought before it, early 2000s and whatnot, but this certainly, this millennium or the last 10, 15 years has been entertainment, and that's what we want to see, isn't it? We want to see us have a go and go toe to toe and give it a crack.
Yeah, the one thing I will say is that a more conservative performance is more acceptable against a team like Brentford, who will rip you to pieces if you don't treat them with respect. Than say, I mean, we use a Coventry example there. Obviously, Coventry aren't a brilliant side, so obviously that performance was disappointing because we feel like we should be doing better against a team like Coventry. I mean, listen, I'll be honest, if we go to Brentford and do shut up shop but steal a win and make it 3 points, I'll be absolutely landed, and I won't really care too much about the performance on the day. But yeah, but in general, it does feel like the kind of style of play and the attitude is going in the right direction on the whole. One other thing to point out about Brentford, they've got one of the worst defences in the league so far this season. They've conceded 11 goals, and only 5 clubs in the Championship have conceded more. They're by far the most kind of generous defensively in the top half of the table. So again, there is something to go after there if you are positive enough and if you are willing to have a go.
Yeah, definitely. Well, it's going to be a bit of a lottery trying to predict the starting lineup. We were, up until about a week or so ago, we were pretty much saying, there might be an odd change here or there. But clearly now, I think we've hit the point where clubs are starting to make a few more changes, Steve. And I guess the statement you made earlier on stands true in that while you think there may be those changes, keeping the shape to you is important and not sacrificing the number 10. Is there anyone in particular you'd like to see make a return? I don't suppose there's anyone in particular you want to see dropped, but in terms of rotation, is there anything you expect or hope to see?
Well, I think Bennett should come in. He needs to play these 2 games for me. Nothing personal to Kyle Norton, but I think that would be quite a wise move. Grimes, he's probably going to come back in. Might be for Smith rather than Fulton, mind, I think, because it would be a bit unfair, especially to drop Fulton. But, I mean, it'd be a surprise if Grimes and Bennett didn't come in. That's how I'm looking at it, really. They're the 2 moves I'm expecting, and you couldn't really complain at either. Other than that, it'll probably stay the same. There's a chance Palmer might come in for Danda. It would be a little bit harsh, but I'd sort of understand it. So, but I think Grimes and especially Bennett, surely they're going to end up back in the 11, probably for both games this week, because they're both tough, aren't they?
Yeah, we're seeing Danda start the games recently and Palmer replacing him or coming off the bench. Gitto, maybe that'll be flip reversed and Danda will get the last 15-20 minutes after Palmer starts the game. I don't think anyone would necessarily see that as a step up or step down at this stage, because they both contributed, as we spoke about earlier in the podcast, and maybe that's what we're going to see now. Dare I say, Cooper using substitutes, which is something we're not got used to still, but certainly the squad is going to be utilised this season, as I think, and those sorts of changes we can expect on a weekly basis.
Yeah, I think it's going to be quite fluid, and I don't think we should overreact when kind of notable players are left on the bench, because usually it's going to be for relaxation. The one thing I'll say is we're going into an international break after these games, so perhaps Cooper can feel, maybe I can squeeze an extra game or 2 out of these players, and then they'll get a 2-week break to recover from it. So it may actually be a good time, if you are going to stretch them just that little bit further, just ask them to push a little bit more before they get a break. Maybe now is the time to do it. So possibly we'll see less rotation over the coming week.
Yeah, it's a very good point. And Steve, considering our record post-international break is absolutely fucking shocking, I think getting something on the board in the next 2 games could be an added bonus.
Yeah, that's true, isn't it? Because we, as you say, our record after international breaks is not the best, but it's going to be a tough week. I think if we came away with 6 points at the end of this, I'd be very surprised and ecstatic, quite frankly. But hopefully we can at least win one of the games. I think that would be excellent.
Do you think 3 points is the barometer? I know you said that for the games with Stoke and Blackburn, but I really feel like if we can get 3 points in these 2 games, irrespective of meaning that means we lose one, I feel like that's a real statement that we're up towards the top end of the league, and we're not necessarily going to be, falling away anytime soon, Gitto.
Kind of, but on the other hand, I'm starting to think like maybe there's logic in just saying, okay, against the top teams, you go for draws, and then you at least keep everybody a certain distance away from you. Yeah. You draw against the top teams, and then you win against the bottom. There is a logic in that. I mean, when you look last season, we got a heck of a lot of draws, and those draws in the end made a big difference to our league position. So Yeah, and it's all about not losing. I think at the moment we've only lost one game this season. That's put us in really good stead. We are tough to beat, and teams know that we're tough to beat now. So if we do go out and get, I mean, whichever way it happens, if we get 3 points and lose another game this week, I'll think that's a pretty decent result. If we go out to get 2 draws against 2 very good sides, I'll also think that's a pretty good result. I think whatever we get from this week, I think we have to see it as a bonus, because they are going to be 2 tough matches. But they will tell us a lot about where we stand this season, and if we do manage to get good results out of these games, then suddenly perhaps we can get a bit excited.
Yeah, and I reiterate what I said earlier on as well. If we go into it playing the number 10 and we go at the Brentfords and the Norwiches, then the attitude will fill me with excitement. If we do end up winning one and losing one, and I just feel like, okay, maybe Cooper is evolving a little bit, and he's learning, and he may be thinking, do you know what? The way football is structured and points are structured, you can get 3 points, 3 points for a win and a loss, and 2 points for 2 draws. So it does weigh heavier to go for it, and maybe we see that kind of football maintain. We saw it after lockdown, Steve, didn't we? Where we started playing this a little bit more, throw caution to the wind football. How do you see that panning out against Brentford if we do stick with it? What sort of scoreline would you be would you be predicting?
It's a tough game, so I'm not going to predict a great result for us. Unfortunately, I'm going to say a 2-1 win for Brentford. But I think a defeat wouldn't be the end of the world. It would be disappointing, but we're not going to win every game, are we? And it is one of the tougher games, certainly one of the more tougher games that we've had so far this season. So it wouldn't be a huge shock, I don't think, if it ended in a defeat.
What about you, Gito?
Well, I've predicted bad. Well, I've not been predicting wins for the Swans recently, and we have been getting wins. So I'm definitely not going to predict a win against Brentford. I'm going to go for a 1-1 draw, though, which I generally think we may get, and I generally think that would be a good result if we were to get it.
Would be. I'm actually going to stick to current form and predict a Swans win. I think we'll win this one 1-0, and maybe we can all start getting a little bit more excited about what the season has to hold. But bear in mind, it's Norwich following up. We'll chat about that briefly, gents. We won't do a prediction until after the Brentford game, see how it pans out, and we'll obviously post that on Twitter for all our followers to see how we predict. But fresh off the back of Brentford away is Norwich away, Steve. You throw all your eggs into one basket, and then you come out and you've got another fight on the other end of it. So it's going to be a big week. It's going to be a battling week, isn't it?
Yeah, it is going to be difficult, and obviously Norwich, a horrible journey. And you think about it now, obviously with England going into a lockdown, I mean, are hotels and stuff even going to be open? Because, I mean, if they're not, then what are we going to do in terms of transport and stuff like that? I mean, it's going to be a right pain in the arse, isn't it? Because it's such a horrible journey. I mean, would we have to literally fly? Because obviously otherwise we'd have to travel up on the day of the game, bus-wise, and travel back. And I mean, if you tell me we're going to be travelling at 6 a.m. on a bus to Norwich, I'd give us more or less no hope of a result. So, it could be a tricky one. I don't know what the rules are, if I'm honest. I mean, hotels might be open for key workers, but whether that count as us?
Well, I think, as they said, elite sport would continue. So I hope that would mean provisions for elite sport as well, but I don't know that that's the case.
Yeah, I think hotels are still open for kind of key workers. So I'd imagine that the same provisions are made for elite. Although I think it would be rich to call footballers key workers in this period too.
It would, but it would also be harsh to say you can't have an overnight stay for about a 350-mile each way journey.
Oh, I think me and Gito both are hoping at least that the
like I said, if we can't have a hotel stay, then let's be honest, it's probably going to be a bad afternoon.
I think it's the equivalency of saying, yes, elite sport can continue, but you're not allowed to leave your home cities. So we're really can't continue, can it? Because no one's going to be able to play against anyone. I think if you're going to have elite sport continuing, as this government have said, then you need to allow for them to compete and do what they would do normally to within reason, I suppose. That's a goal. Again, that's just on one point of what you said of if you had to travel to Norwich on the day and play on the same day, Steve. Would you? Well, I suppose it all depends on Brentford, doesn't it? But if we don't have a shocker against Brentford, for me, it would be more of the same. And again, Norwich, they're obviously definitely going to be one of the big hitters and are in good form as well. It's one of those ones. Norwich away isn't a nice one, but you'd go there and you'd hope that you could make a mark. You there, Steve?
All right, I didn't realise it was for me. I thought it was
sorry, mate. Yeah.
Oh, no, that's all right. No, look, Norwich is going to be a tough game, isn't it? I know obviously they had a miserable season last year, but they've kept the bulk of their players together, really, haven't they? So it is going to be difficult. Again, I don't think they've come flying out of the blocks or anything this season. I mean, one game they lost to Derby, didn't they? So that was a bad one. They did win over the weekend at Bristol City. So, as I said earlier in the podcast, really, I do think that the relegated side's probably going to have a bigger advantage this year than probably for a number of years because of the condensed season, the packed schedule, and the fact that a lot of clubs probably didn't have the money to buy many players off them. So, it's as the season goes on, that probably is going to be a benefit for those sides, and that would include Norwich, really, who obviously did really well last time we were in this division. So, yeah, I think Norwich should feel quite confident about a top 6 finish.
Yeah, if you were Cooper, Gito, would you? I think it was Steve who made the point. Would you be tempted to try and squeeze an extra week out of these players? What you'd perceive to be even in the strong squad, his best 11, his chosen 11, and throw them in for these 2 games, and knowing there's an international break at the end of it.
Yeah, I think so. I think obviously it depends. If a player's really, really shattered, then rest them. But if whereas I think over the past week I've been thinking, okay, let's not take any risks. Let's make sure everybody gets a little bit of game time and everybody gets a little bit of time on the bench. I don't think that's necessary over the coming week. I think we can just push a few players a bit extra. If we need a few key players to just push themselves a little bit harder, then yeah, I think we can get away with. Hopefully we can get away with playing them a bit more, because I mean Brentford's going to be a difficult match, but Norwich is going to be too. They seem to be building up now after a bit of a slow start. They seem to be finding their feet and getting results. And our record at Carrow Road, by the way, is pretty dreadful. The last time we won there was when Ferry Bodder scored back in 2008, and that's the only win we've had there in the last 70 years. So we do not like going to Carrow Road. It's a long trip and it's not a happy hunting ground for us. So I'd say go all out for it. Let's because if we can get a good result going into the international break, what a psychological boost that will be against a team that, like Steve said, is probably going to be in the mix come the end of the season, because they do have a very good side, a very, very deep squad as well. And I've always liked Farke, the manager, as well. I think they play good football, attacking football, and express themselves. And anything we can get at Carrow Road is going to be a bonus in my eyes.
And the thing is as well, just to wrap it up, if we can get not terrible results, decent results against Brentford and Norwich, you go into the international break, you come out, yes, we're traditionally very poor after the international break, we've spoken about that at length, but it's Rotherham at home, and no disrespect, but if you got that buoyancy and they got that bounce in your step, Gito, as you were just talking about, from the result before the international break, then you go into that with a confidence, hopefully, that the international break hasn't dampened too much, and yes, a Rotherham, for a team looking to compete at the top end of the table at home. I know home and away doesn't mean much at the moment, but is one of those games you can highlight and say, well, there's one we need to chalk up as a home win. So, it could turn out a very, very fruitful first half of November. But we'll see. We'll see how it goes. That's about it for this podcast, though. My thanks to Steve and Gito as ever, and for your contributions as well with the Twitter question this week. Keep an eye on Twitter. There'll be a lot of updates going up from our man Dan, and we'll be back here hopefully next week to talk about those two games just before the international break. And who knows, maybe we're looking at a very, very positive podcast once again. But from myself, Gito and Steve, thanks for listening. Bye-bye.